Picture the Kremlin war room at 3 a.m. The map of Ukraine is lit like a Christmas tree. Aides shuffle papers, and for once, no one dares pour tea. That sudden chill running down spines in Moscow isn't the air conditioning, it's London. The United Kingdom just stacked 3 converging moves that together changed the tempo of the war. A brand new long-range missile effort, the groundwork for a multinational force on Ukrainian soil, and a maritime sanctions play that goes straight for the cash registers of Russia's war economy. Add a torrent of British-built interceptor drones and a long-term funding pipeline, and you get the thing every general fears most: momentum on the other side. This story starts years earlier, when London became one of Kyiv's most reliable patrons after the full-scale invasion. The UK sent tanks, air defense missiles, Storm Shadow cruise missiles, and training, and then locked in a multi-year pledge, at least £3 billion a year in military aid through 2030/31, backed by G7 plans to channel windfall profits from frozen Russian central bank assets into Ukraine's budget. That's not a headline, that's policy, designed to outlast any week-to-week political drama. The numbers matter, because in war, ammunition is policy. But what has Russia rattled right now is the UK's next move, Project Nightfall, a rapid program to give Ukraine a ground-launched ballistic missile with real reach. The British government says the missile is being designed to throw a 200-kilogram warhead more than 500 kilometers, survive heavy jamming, salvo fire from a truck, shoot and scoot in minutes, and cost less than £800,000 a round, with a target production cadence of up to 10 systems a month. In plain English, a deep strike hammer you can afford to swing often, built for the electronic knife fight Ukraine lives in every night. It's the kind of capability that makes railway yards, fuel depots, glide bomb stockpiles, and bomber bases deep inside Russia sweat through the winter. London isn't pitching Nightfall as a far-off science project. The Ministry of Defence has already launched the competition, named the specs, and put real money on the table for a sprint to prototypes. Independent outlets across Europe and beyond confirm the broad contours: range, payload, rapid development, and the intent to fill Ukraine's long-range strike gap as American supplies have fluctuated. The nuance here matters. It's a prototype race first, not a production line, yet. But for planners in Moscow, the signal is unmistakable. Longer arms are coming, and they'll be British. If Nightfall is the punch, the shield London's adding is surprisingly small and cylindrical. Starting now, British industry is spinning up mass production of Octopus interceptor drones, Ukrainian-designed, British-built, optimized to hunt Shahed-type one-way attack drones. The aim, corroborated by both governments, is to ramp to roughly 1,000 interceptors per month, beginning in February, with designs iterated on a 6-week cycle based on live frontline data. In a war where the sky at midnight looks like a beehive of cheap, lethal quadcopters, mass-produced interceptors are how you restore some quiet to the grid and keep transformers alive till dawn. It's air defense by swarm, and Kyiv's engineers are, in effect, co-managing a British factory floor. Somewhere, a Victorian-era industrialist just smiled. London's third pressure point is less cinematic and more accountant-friendly, which is precisely why it terrifies the Kremlin: money denial at sea. With Russia's shadow fleet of unflagged or dubiously flagged oil tankers slipping around sanctions, British ministers are now exploring a more forceful maritime option: seizing or detaining vessels that evade sanctions or sail without a valid flag, potentially with special forces boardings under domestic legal authorities. If executed, that's not just a sting operation. It's a moving blockade against revenue that underwrites missiles and shells. Even public discussion of such boardings has tank owners scrambling to change routes, shells, flags, anything to stay out of the English Channel's new no funny business zone. And yes, lawyers are already circling the legal questions, because what's a modern war without a couple of maritime law seminars? Now, zoom back out to the ground. The UK just committed £200 million from its core defence budget, not a supplemental, to prepare British forces for a potential deployment to Ukraine as part of a new Multinational Force for Ukraine, MNFU. This isn't about sending brigades to the front line tomorrow. The model, spelled out by London, Paris and Kyiv, is for troops to deploy after a ceasefire or peace deal, primarily to western Ukraine, to train, secure logistics, run deterrence patrols across domains, and rebuild Ukrainian capacity at speed. It's a peace-holding force with teeth, built on a framework that grants MNFU personnel the right to use force to protect the mission and its infrastructure. That's not just symbolism, that's rules of engagement. How many British troops? London hasn't published a figure, but reputable reporting suggests the UK would send fewer than 7,500, with France providing a similar number, for a combined force on the order of 15,000. That tracks with the concept of a post-ceasefire presence designed to hold gains, not fight forward. It also reflects a reality. Scaling a mission while keeping NATO's flank strong is a balancing act. But even at that size, an MNFU plants a NATO-standard tentpole inside Ukraine's sovereignty, the political signal Moscow has spent 2 years trying to prevent. Put those strands together: long-range strike, drone interception at scale, maritime money denial, and a post-ceasefire force, and you get why the chatter in Russian channels suddenly sounds brittle. Nightfall's range makes Kaluga, Kursk, Rostov, and Crimea's depots fair game. Interceptor swarms turn the Shahed math upside down. If it costs you 10 times more to attack a substation than it costs Kyiv to stop you, your winter strategy leaks money. Maritime boardings threaten the grey zone where sanctions die of paperwork fatigue. And MNFU planning tells every Russian commander from Tokmak to Melitopol, whatever you grab today will face an organised international presence tomorrow. Panic isn't a plan, but it does explain a spike in angry statements and sudden missile theatrics aimed at scaring Europe off. There's precedent for London giving Kyiv longer claws. In 2024 to 25, British supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles helped Ukraine strike deep airfields, HQs, ammo hubs, inside Russian-held territory and, with political clearance, across the border. The UK's own Defence Secretary later underscored that Ukraine was hitting Russian military targets that Moscow's own citizens could see and know about, and referenced the damage to dozens of long-range bombers in an operation that made Kremlin aviation planners reconsider where they park at night. Nightfall is an evolution of that doctrine. Keep Russian logistics nervous at ranges the enemy can't easily cover with S-300s and S-400s, especially when you fire, scoot, and blend back into the road network before counter-battery radars finish their first yawn.
Will Nightfall show up tomorrow?
No. This is a race to prototypes first, then production. The UK has set a cost ceiling, a monthly production goal, and mission parameters that shout pragmatic mass, not gold-plated unicorn. Analysts caution that prototypes aren't war-winning on their own. Integration, targeting, and sustainment decide whether new arrows actually fly nightly. But even the announcement has operational value. Russian logistics must now plan as if 500-plus kilometer British ballistic sticks will exist soon. Because the alternative, planning as if they won't, is how you end up with a smoking train and a very uncomfortable phone call with headquarters. The drone piece is even more immediate. Octopus isn't a boutique gadget, it's a production philosophy. The premise is brutal and elegant. If Russia floods the sky with cheap one-way attack drones, meet them with interceptors that are cheaper, faster to build, and ruthlessly upgradable based on last week's telemetry. Design cycles measured in weeks, not years, let Ukrainian and British engineers push counter-tactics faster than Garan operators can copy-paste. And because this line runs in the UK, it's insulated from some of the resource and power constraints inside Ukraine. One small irony: British factories honed in the Industrial Revolution are now churning out anti-drone drones designed by engineers who grew up coding on smartphones. History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, in 2.4 gigahertz. Maritime enforcement is where the geopolitics turns spiky. Seizing an unflagged or misflagged tanker that's laundering Russian oil isn't just a police action, it's economic warfare by handcuff. The legalities are gnarly: flag state jurisdiction, high seas freedoms, sanctions regimes. But London is signalling it believes there's domestic legal ground to act in targeted cases. Even floating that option is leverage. Insurers get nervous, ports get picky, and convenience flags suddenly look less convenient. If a few cargoes vanish into legal limbo, that's fewer rubles fueling glide bombs. Expect Moscow to howl about piracy. Expect British lawyers to answer with footnotes thick enough to stun an ox. Somewhere, a maritime attorney just whispered, "At last, my Super Bowl." Then there's the Troop Prep Fund, the £200 million to harden vehicles, comms, and counter-drone protection for a potential deployment. Significantly, London pulled this from the core budget. It means this isn't a passing fancy. It also means British units will show up with the right armour panels, the right antennas, the right EW filters, because the quickest way to lose credibility is to arrive in theatre and get chewed up by quadcopters on day one. France, for its part, has said publicly it could send thousands, and Paris and London have now signed the same declaration with Ukraine. The MNFU will use force to protect itself and its mission. That's a message not just to Russia, but to any spoilers who think peace-holding troops are museum guards. They aren't. Of course, Russia will test the edges. The moment an MNFU appears on Ukrainian soil, expect information operations on steroids, claims of occupation, disinformation about NATO bases, maybe even stunts near supply corridors. But a legally grounded multilateral presence complicates escalation for Moscow. Harassing an MNFU convoy in western Ukraine isn't a low-risk probe. It's a potential multi-state incident. It boxes in the Kremlin's favorite tactic, salami slicing, and makes the political cost of one more little slice uncomfortably high. If you're wondering why Russian state TV suddenly rediscovered the word provocation, that's why. Financially, the UK's Long Horizon pledge, £3 billion annually, meshes with the G7's plan to use profits from frozen Russian central bank assets to underwrite Ukraine's budget and defence for 2026 to 2027. That combination, predictable grant aid plus revenue from Russia's own parked money, blunts the Kremlin's winter strategy of outlasting Western will. You can try to time fatigue, but it's harder to time bond coupons. For Kyiv, predictable cash means predictable shells, instructors, and spare parts. For Moscow, it means the wait them out calendar just got messy. Skeptics will ask the right questions. Can Britain really field a brand new missile quickly? Will MNFU forces deter or just draw fire? Can maritime seizures avoid unintended escalations? These aren't trivial. On Nightfall, the caution is real. Prototypes are not battalions, and the hardest work starts after the press release. But the virtue of the British approach is modularity. Keep the missile cheap enough to buy in volume, rugged enough to survive EW chaos, and mobile enough to survive a first strike. On MNFU, the deterrent value isn't in how many rifles face east. It's in the political and logistical architecture that tells Moscow a ceasefire will not be a pause to reload. And at sea, smart, legally clean cases against the worst offenders in the Shadow Fleet can move the needle without inviting a naval incident. The aim isn't a tanker war, it's a revenue squeeze. There's another layer Moscow can't ignore: the UK's record of greenlighting Ukrainian long-range strikes on legitimate military targets inside Russia when strategically necessary. That precedent, paired with Nightfall's prospective range, suggests that if Russia escalates with mass glide bombing and energy terror, Ukraine's response options will broaden, not shrink. Russian bomber wings already learned a painful lesson about parking in neat rows. Adding a land-launched British ballistic threat complicates their life further. The simple act of dispersing assets, moving depots, and hardening shelters costs time, fuel, and money, and saps the efficiency of Russia's strike machine. Strike deeper, intercept faster, seize smarter, deploy ready, fund longer. Each verb forces Russian planners to react, not dictate. Every minute they spend rerouting oil cargoes, building more blast walls around Engels, moving ammunition 5 districts back, or trying to jam a cheaper British interceptor drone that updates its brain every fortnight is a minute not spent advancing in Zaporizhia. War is a contest of O-Day loops: observe, orient, decide, act. And the UK is trying to shorten Ukraine's and lengthen Russia's. That is how you make an opponent panic. You take away their time. Strategically, London's moves also bind allies. The drone coalition, co-led with Latvia, has already placed contracts for tens of thousands of FPV drones. The MNFU framework gives capitals a way to participate in stabilisation without arguing over Article 5. And the asset profit loans give finance ministries a predictable scaffold. That, in turn, encourages European industry to invest in surge capacity, in shells, in radars, in repair hubs, because they can see the orders coming. Nothing terrifies autocracies more than democracies that plan beyond an election cycle. And yes, this is still war. None of these moves erase the brutality at the front. Ukraine still faces barrages, glide bombs, and grinding assaults. But the UK's next steps are the opposite of performative. They're functional levers aimed at the physics of this conflict. Range denies sanctuary, interceptors deny terror, money denial slows production, and a post-ceasefire presence denies the quick relapse Moscow hopes for. If there's an edge to London's tone, it's because the point of deterrence is to be heard before you have to be felt. So here's the closing question, the one that will echo from Rostov to the Black Sea and back to London. When your opponent starts reaching farther, blocking your drones, choking your funding streams, and laying the legal and logistical scaffolding for forces to stand on the ground you wanted to retake, do you call that provocation, or do you call it checkmate in slow motion? Either way, the UK's next Ukraine move is already on the board. Moscow can panic, or it can adapt. Kyiv just needs London to keep doing what it's doing, quietly shortening the war.